Yanzi is one of the top 10 most classic and popular stories in Pu Songling's Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. In Dongqing Prefecture, there was a veterinarian surnamed Bian who had a daughter named Yanzi. Yanzi was both intelligent and beautiful. Her father cherished her deeply and intended to marry her into a scholarly family. However, those prominent families rejected the proposal due to their lowly background, refusing to establish a connection with the Bian family. As a result, Yanzi grew into adulthood without being married. The family living next door to the Bians was the Li family. The wife of the Li family, Mrs. Wang, had a light-hearted and playful nature, becoming friends with Yanzi through their casual conversations. One day, Yanzi escorted Mrs. Wang to the door and noticed a young man passing by in front of their house. He was dressed in white, with a white hat, exuding an air of elegance. Seeing him, Yanzi's heart stirred, and her beautiful eyes fixed upon him. The young man lowered his head and walked quickly past. Even as he walked farther away, Yanzi continued to gaze at his departing figure. Mrs. Wang noticed her interest and jokingly remarked, "A young lady as intelligent and beautiful as you. If paired with this young man, that would truly be an ideal match." Blushing, Yanzi became embarrassed and shyly remained silent. Mrs. Wang asked, "Do you know this young man?" Yanzi replied, "I don't know him." Mrs. Wang said, "He is a scholar from the South Alley, named Yi Qiajun. His father was a jurin and has passed away. I used to be their neighbor, so I know him. He's wearing white clothing because his wife passed away, and he's still in mourning. If you're interested, I can pass a message to him and have him send a matchmaker." Yanzi still didn't speak, and Mrs. Wang left with a smile. After several days with no word from Mrs. Wang, Yanzi began to suspect that Mrs. Wang hadn't found the time to go see Qiajun. She also thought that being the descendant of an official family, he might not be willing to lower himself. Pondering these thoughts, she became restless and unhappy, unable to forget him. She lost her appetite, fell ill, and was confined to her bed, appearing fatigued and weary. Coincidentally, Mrs. Wang came to visit her. Seeing her in such a condition, she inquired about the cause of her illness. Yanzi replied, "I don't know myself. Since the day we parted, I've felt gloomy and downcast, and it has led to this illness. I'm just buying time. Sooner or later, I won't be able to hold on." Speaking softly, Mrs. Wang said, "My husband went out on business and hasn't returned yet, so there was no one to deliver a message to. Scholar Yi, are you truly sick because of this matter?" Yanzi blushed, remaining silent for a while. Mrs. Wang joked, "If it's really about this matter, and you're in such a condition, what reservations could you possibly have? Why not invite him to meet at night? Would he really refuse?" Sighing, Yanzi said, "Things have come to this point. I have no more shame left. As long as he doesn't look down upon my humble family, he can send a matchmaker right away. My illness will naturally improve. But if we were to meet secretly, that's absolutely not an option." Mrs. Wang nodded and then left. When Wang was young, she had a secret relationship with the neighboring scholar Suji. After she got married, whenever she learned that her husband had gone on a business trip, Suji would come to renew their past acquaintance. On this particular night, Suji happened to visit, and Wang shared Yanzi's story as a joke, teasing him and playfully asking him to pass the message to Qiajun. Suji was well aware of Yanzi's beauty and was secretly delighted to hear it, thinking that there might be an opportunity for him. He wanted to discuss it with Wang, but was afraid she would get jealous. He pretended to be indifferent and subtly inquired about the layout of Yanzi's house, gathering all the necessary information. The next night, Suji scaled the wall to enter the Bian's residence, reaching Yanzi's bedroom and tapping on the window. Yanzi asked, "Who is it?" Suji replied, "I'm Qiajun." Yanzi said, "I've been missing you, not just for a night, but for a lifetime. If you truly love me, you should have sent a matchmaker to my house by now. If you want to be secretive and improper, I can't agree." Suji pretended to agree and earnestly asked to hold her hand as a sign of their commitment. Unable to reject him outright, Yanzi reluctantly got out of bed and opened the door. Suji hurriedly entered and embraced her, seeking intimacy. Weak and unable to resist, Yanzi collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe. Suji quickly helped her up. Yanzi said, "Who are you, this ruffian? You can't be Shu Kai. If you were him, a gentle and refined person, upon learning about my illness, you would have shown compassion. How could you be so rough? If you continue like this, I'll scream, tarnishing both our reputations. There won't be any benefit for either of us." Fearing that his ruse would be exposed, Suji dared not push further. He only asked for a promise to meet again at a later date. Yanzi agreed to meet on the day of their marriage. Suji protested that it was too far off and insisted she provide a more immediate date. Annoyed by his persistence, she agreed to meet after she recovered from her illness. Suji demanded proof, but Yanzi refused. He then grabbed her foot and removed one of her embroidered shoes before leaving. Yanzi called him back and said, "I've already given myself to you. What else do I have to hold back? I'm just afraid this matter will turn sour, leading to gossip. Now that the embroidered shoe is in your possession, I assume you won't return it. If you change your mind in the future, I'll have no way out." Suji left the Bian residence and spent the night with Wang. After lying down to sleep, he kept thinking about the shoe and surreptitiously searched his clothing for it, but the shoe was nowhere to be found. He quickly got up, lit a lamp, shook his clothes, and searched. He asked Wang if she had taken his belongings, but she ignored him, leading him to suspect that Wang had hidden the shoe. Seeing him so anxious, Wang intentionally teased him, hoping to make him confess. Suji realized he couldn't keep hiding the truth and confessed the whole story to her. After explaining, he grabbed a lantern and searched outside, but still couldn't find the shoe. Frustrated, he eventually returned to his room to sleep, secretly hoping that since it was late at night, no one had seen the shoe fall, and it might still be on the road. Early the next morning, he went out searching, but in the end, he couldn't find it. Previously, there was a man in the neighborhood named Mao Da who was idle and unemployed. He had previously tried to seduce Wang, but was unsuccessful. He knew about the affair between Suji and Wang and sought to catch them in the act to blackmail Wang. One night, Mao Da walked past Wang's door and found it slightly ajar. He quietly entered the house. As he stepped inside, he accidentally kicked something soft on the ground. Upon closer inspection, he discovered a woman's shoe wrapped in a handkerchief. He crouched beneath the window to eavesdrop and overheard Suji recounting the events involving the shoe. He was elated and quickly left. A few nights later, Mao Da climbed over the wall into Yanzi's house. Unfamiliar with the layout, he accidentally stumbled into the room of Yanzi's father, Mr. Bian. Upon seeing a man through the window, Mr. Bian recognized that he was here for his daughter. Filled with anger, Mr. Bian grabbed a knife and rushed outside. Mao Da was startled and tried to escape, but Mr. Bian caught up to him. In desperation, Mao Da wrestled the knife from Mr. Bian's hand. Yanzi's mother woke up and began shouting. Unable to escape, Mao Da used the knife to kill Mr. Bian, then climbed over the wall and fled. Yanzi had recovered from her illness somewhat and heard the commotion. She got out of bed to see what was happening. Her mother and she lit a lantern and saw Mr. Bian's head split open, unable to speak, and soon he died. They found one of Yanzi's embroidered shoes near the base of the wall. Yanzi's mother pressed her for an explanation, and Yanzi tearfully confessed what had happened. Though she spared Wang by only mentioning that Ikia-jun had come to her on his own accord. After daybreak, they reported the incident to the local authorities. Officials were dispatched to arrest Ikia-jun. Being timid and unable to speak, Ikia-jun, who was 19 years old, appeared shy and nervous like a young girl upon encountering strangers. His arrest terrified him, and in court, he trembled and struggled to find words. Observing his demeanor, the local magistrate became convinced of his guilt and subjected him to severe torture. The young scholar couldn't bear the pain of the punishment and eventually confessed under duress. When he was brought to trial, he faced torture similar to what he experienced in the county. Yearning was consumed by anger and wanted to confront Yanzi face to face during the trial. However, every time they came face to face, Yanzi would berate him so harshly that he dared not speak, rendering him unable to defend himself. As a result, he was sentenced to death. The legal proceedings went through multiple reviews by different officials, and the collective opinion was that the judgment was accurate. Subsequently, this case was sent for re-examination to the Jinan prefecture. At the time, the prefect of Jinan was Wu Nande. Upon seeing Yearning, he didn't appear like a vicious murderer, which left him puzzled. He secretly had someone gently inquire about the matter from Yearning to have him reveal the entire sequence of events. Hearing Yearning's account, the prefect became even more convinced of his innocence. After several days of contemplation, the prefect convened a court session to interrogate the case. He began by asking Yanzi, on the night in question, after you and Yearning had an engagement, did anyone else know about this? Yanzi replied, no one else knew. He then inquired, when you saw Yearning pass by your house that evening, was there anyone with you? Yanzi's answer remained, there was no one else. Next, he summoned Yearning to the stand, and first comforted him with kind words, urging him to tell the truth. Yearning stated, on that day, as I walked past her house, I saw my former neighbor Wang along with a young girl. I quickly averted my gaze and left, without speaking to either of them. The prefect then rebuked Yanzi, saying, you just claimed there was no one else present. How come you now mention your former neighbor Wang? He immediately ordered her to be subjected to torture. Fearful, Yanzi admitted, there was a Wang nearby, but this matter had nothing to do with her. The prefect adjourned and ordered Wang's arrest. A few days later, Wang was apprehended and brought before the prefect. He prohibited Wang and Yanzi from meeting or speaking, and swiftly began the interrogation. He asked Wang, who is the murderer? Wang replied, I don't know. The prefect deceived her, saying, Yanzi has already confessed and implicated you in the killing of Mr. Bian, why haven't you confessed yet? The woman cried out, this is a miscarriage of justice. The girl was after men herself. Although I joked about matchmaking, it was all in jest. She let a man into the house herself. How would I know? The prefect continued to press her, and Wang eventually revealed the jokes they had shared earlier. The prefect then summoned Yanzi back to the stand, angrily questioning. You said Wang had no knowledge, so how come she now confesses to matchmaking for you? Sobbing, Yanzi said, I was foolish and caused my father's tragic death. This case may not be resolved for years, and it's agonizing to involve others. I can't bear it. The prefect questioned Wang. After you joked with Yanzi, did you tell anyone? Wang testified, I didn't tell anyone. The prefect grew furious, saying, husbands and wives share their secrets in bed. How could you not have told anyone? Wang testified, my husband has been away from home for a long time. The prefect said, those who mock others often think themselves clever. How can you claim not to have told anyone? He ordered her to be subjected to torture. With no other choice, Wang admitted, I mentioned it to Suji. Subsequently, the prefect ordered the release of Yearning and the arrest of Suji. Suji was brought in for questioning, and he claimed, I had no knowledge of the murder. The prefect retorted, sleeping with a loose woman could never make you a good person, and proceeded with severe torture. Suji finally admitted, I deceived Yanzi, that's true. But after the embroidered shoe was lost, I didn't dare go anymore. As for the murder, I genuinely had no involvement. The prefect said, someone who sneaks over walls is capable of anything. He continued with torture. Unable to endure, Suji confessed to the murder. The oral confession was presented, and everyone praised the prefect's skillful handling of the case. The case was ironclad, and Suji awaited execution after the autumn harvest. However, despite Suji's loose behavior, he was still a talented scholar from Shandong. Hearing about the renowned scholar Shi Yushin's abilities, and knowing he held favor for those with talent, Suji wrote a letter and entrusted someone to present it to Shi Yushin, pleading his innocence. The letter's contents were sorrowful and tragic. Shi Yeshan examined the confession material of the case and repeatedly reviewed it. He slammed the table and exclaimed, "This young scholar is truly innocent." He requested the higher authorities to transfer the case for his re-examination. He asked Suji, "Where did you drop the embroidered shoe?" Suji replied, "I forgot, but I had it in my sleeve when I knocked on Wang's door." He turned to Yanzi and asked, "Apart from Suji, how many other adulterers do you have?" Wang testified, "None." Shi Yeshan stated, "Promiscuous women don't just have one affair." He ordered her to be whipped. The woman knelt on the ground, bloodied from repeatedly kowtowing. She vehemently maintained that there were no other adulterers and the questioning was dropped. He then asked her, "Your husband is far away, haven't there been people who visited you under the pretext of borrowing something or delivering items?" Wang said, "There have been a few. Individuals A and B have come 1 or 2 times each to borrow money or deliver things. Individuals A and B were both low-class characters in the streets, both interested in this woman, yet they hadn't taken any significant actions." Shi Yeshan noted their names as well and ordered their arrest for further questioning. Once all the suspects were apprehended, Shi Yeshan brought them to the city god temple. He had them kneel before the incense table and address them, saying, "A few days ago, I dreamt of the city god Bodhisattva. He told me that the murderer was among the 4 or 5 of you. Now, facing the city god, do not speak falsehoods. If you confess, your punishment may be lenient. If you lie and get caught, there will be no mercy." The suspects all vehemently denied having committed murder. Shi Yeshan then ordered the instruments of torture to be brought in, and had their hair tied up, clothes removed, and readied them for torture. They all cried out for being wronged. He ordered the instruments removed, saying, "Since you refuse to confess, let the Bodhisattva himself point out the culprit." He had thick felt blankets cover all the windows in the main hall, blocking out any light. With their backs exposed, the suspects were led into a dark room, given a basin of water to wash their hands, and then bound with ropes against the wall. He commanded, "Stand facing the wall and do not move. The city god Bodhisattva will write on the back of the murderer." After a while, he called them out and examined each person's back. Pointing at Mao Da, he declared, "This is the murderer." In reality, Shi Yeshan had previously ordered ashes to be smeared on the wall, and instructed the suspects to wash their hands in cool ash water. The marks of the Bodhisattva were created on the back of the real culprit using this method, as his back touched the wall, thus making it gray. As they were leaving, he had them cover their backs with their hands, causing the soot from the coal to darken their skin. Shi Yeshan had initially suspected Mao Da to be the murderer, and this confirmed his suspicions. Under severe torture, Mao Da admitted to the actual sequence of events leading up to and after the murder. In the end, Shi Yeshan pronounced, "Suji, following the path of ruin by playing tricks and inviting deadly consequences." He earned a reputation for lecherousness, similar to a wastrel. Due to his innocence and trust with Wang, he unexpectedly shared a bed with her as if they were husband and wife. Furthermore, upon Wang's disclosure of Yanzi's intentions, he didn't find contentment in possessing Wang and set his sights on Yanzi. Climbing over walls like a bandit, he easily entered courtyards, akin to a bird, landing gently on the ground. Impersonating Ikia Jun, he deceived Yanzi into opening the door. In his actions, he displayed a lack of dignity, touching and fondling without restraint. Engaging in lascivious behaviors, he disregarded propriety and defamed the character of a scholar. Fortunately, when he heard Yanzi's faint moans during her illness, he still retained a trace of empathy. While coveting the frail condition of the young girl, he hadn't become overly violent. Releasing a beautiful bird from a trap demonstrated a hint of scholarly disposition. But stealing someone's embroidered shoe as a token, is this not the act of a shameless rogue? Fluttering like a butterfly over the wall, he let private words slip that were overheard from behind a closed window. Falling like a lotus petal, the embroidered shoe was lost and disappeared without a trace. A falsehood within a falsehood was born, unjustly implicating not only Ikia Jun but also Suji. Who would believe it? Faced with a great calamity and subjected to harsh torture, he nearly lost his life. Self-inflicted suffering nearly led to dismemberment. Trespassing over walls was already a stain on a scholar's reputation. Enduring suffering for others, it's difficult to dispel the bitterness within the heart. Therefore, we'll temporarily suspend the whipping, using it as a counterbalance to the torment he previously endured. We'll temporarily reduce his sentence to simple clothing, leaving a path for self-redemption. Individuals like Mao Da, cunning and crafty, idle and mischievous, are the scoundrels and ruffians of the neighborhood. Rejected in their attempts to seduce neighboring women, their lustful desires never cease. When Su Ji entered Wang's home, wicked ideas immediately sprouted. Pushing open Wang's door, he eagerly followed Su Ji's footsteps into the courtyard, initially intending to catch them in the act of adultery. However, he overheard news about Yanzi and concocted a scheme to deceive the beautiful young maiden. Little did he know that his spirit was led astray by ghosts and deities. Wanting to enter Yanzi's chamber, he accidentally entered Old Man Beyond's house instead, extinguishing his passionate flame and stirring up a storm in the sea of desire. Old Man Beyond stood boldly in his path, while Mao Da found himself cornered, resulting in him snatching the knife and committing murder. Originally planning to impersonate another to deceive Yanzi, he ended up robbing her of a shoe and escaping, inadvertently causing harm to Su Ji. Such an evil spirit emerged from the realm of romance, but how can a gentle world endure such a malevolent entity? His head must be severed immediately to appease the public. Yanzi, though not yet betrothed, already mature, possessing beauty like Chang, naturally deserving of a husband as handsome as Jade. Initially a celestial being among the rainbow skirt dance troupe, why should she worry about hiding in a golden chamber? Nevertheless, she felt the melancholy of Guan Sui, yearning for an excellent husband. As such, dreams of spring surrounded her, lamenting the fleeting years. Falling for Ikia Jun at first sight, her thoughts turned into illness. The thread of affection entwined, attracting malevolent spirits to dance. For the sake of indulging in her beauty, Su Ji and Mao Da both desired Yanzi. They attempted to impersonate Ikia Jun, like a flock of malevolent birds. The result was the loss of an embroidered shoe and the near tarnishing of the maiden's reputation. Blows were exchanged, nearly claiming Ikia Jun's life. Love sickness is bitter, but when it seeps into the bones, it becomes calamitous. It resulted in her father's death by the blade, turning the beloved into an ill omen. Maintaining purity and righteousness, she managed to retain her spotless virtue. Through her struggle in captivity, the truth of the case was ultimately unveiled. Commendable for resisting Su Ji's advances and remaining chaste, she is truly a virtuous maiden. Her deep admiration for Ikia Jun should be acknowledged, a romantic sentiment that is also a noble affair. Let your local magistrate serve as your matchmaker. Once this case was closed, its story spread far and wide. After Magistrate Wu's interrogation, Yanzi finally realized the injustice suffered by Ikia Jun. When they met in the courtroom, she displayed a face filled with shame and remorse, eyes brimming with tears, as if struggling to express a multitude of regretful and affectionate words. Touched by her deep affection, Ikia Jun's love for her grew even stronger. Yet, he pondered over her humble background and her frequent appearances in the public courtroom, fearing that marrying her might subject him to ridicule. After much contemplation, he made his decision upon the announcement of the verdict. The county official presented him with a marriage gift and arranged a procession accompanied by a band to bring Yanzi to his home. Yi Shi remarked, "Beware. The process of trial must be meticulous. Even if you have already proven that person A falsely bore the blame for person B, who could have imagined that person B was also bearing the blame for person C, all of which were entirely fabricated. Despite the complex nature of the case, there must be loopholes and contradictions within it. If one fails to scrutinize the smallest details, clarity will forever elude them." Alas, while we all admire the sagacity of those who shrewdly judge cases, we often overlook the dedication and earnestness of skillful artisans. In this world, there are those officials positioned above the common people, spending their days playing chess or attending to their own matters, completely oblivious to the suffering of the masses. When they ascend the bench, presiding over court sessions, they sit high and mighty, resorting to brutal methods such as using paddles and shackles to force confessions from those seeking justice below. It's no wonder that under such oppressive rule, there are countless unforgivable miscarriages of justice.